Hello, all right. I think we can get started now. It's 11:30 o'clock here in Germany, 10:30 in the UK. Let's hope that nobody got confused by the time difference and everyone who wanted to be here has actually managed to join us. I want to say welcome to the third SONNET Online Seminar, this time on fighting for local power, how a UK bill seeks to support local energy producers. My name is Olga Krajewska. I'm working for ICLEI Europe, which is a partner organization of the SONNET project on social innovation in energy transitions. And today I'll be moderating this meeting. And my colleague Niklas Miszkowski is also with us here today. He'll be helping out with your questions. We'll be passing them on to our speakers and also moderating the Q&A session at the end of our meeting. Thanks, Niklas. All right. So what is the SONNET project actually about? So SONNET is about social innovation in energy transitions and how these can become drivers for change in the energy sector in Europe. And our goal is to explore how social innovations can accelerate transitions to more sustainable energy systems. And to do so, we have taken a couple of steps. So the first one was to capture the diversity of social innovations in energy. Our SONNET team has mapped many examples of social innovations in energy across Europe, and based on that, we have developed a typology of social innovations in energy, and these results are already available on our website. So if you're interested, please look this up. Our second step was is actually to identify conditions which are necessary for social innovations in energy to thrive. Then we would like to evaluate their potential in energy transitions by exploring business models and various market opportunities. And eventually, we would like to contribute to accelerating sustainable energy transitions by encouraging successful examples of social innovations in energy. And in the core of our project, we have city labs in 6 cities, 6 European cities, where we experiment with various social innovations in energy transition to advance and accelerate energy transitions in these cities. And yeah, for more information, I invite you to visit our SONNET website at sonnet-energy.eu. You will find there many interesting and relevant information regarding our project. You will also find there recordings of our previous seminars, online seminars, and also recording of this one. So if you would like to, if you're interested in this topic, please visit our website. And now, what is actually in the agenda for today's session? So today we are going to talk about campaigning for local renewable energy in the UK. There is huge potential for community scale energy generation to be built up across the country, but unfortunately, it's being blocked by current regulations and disproportionate cost. And that is why Power for People, a non-for-profit organization from the UK, is currently running a campaign for the local electricity bill that would create a needed reform in the UK's energy system and support local energy producers. And today we will also have an impulse from Switzerland. Switzerland is already ahead with their legal framework supporting local energy generation. So we thought it would be actually interesting to compare these two cases, maybe draw some connections between them, and yeah, see what we can learn from the Swiss model. So, and very important information for our attendees, on your right side of the screen, you should be able to see a control panel. And in this control panel, you have a questions box. And feel free to type down all your questions to all of our speakers there. And we will be taking them throughout the whole webinar, so you can type them actually after the presentations of our speakers, and also at the end during our Q&A session. and we'll be taking them in. You can also contact us and ask your question via Twitter. Please use then the hashtag Sonnet Explored, Sonnet with capital letters. This is another way to send your questions in. So for all of this, we have actually planned 60 minutes, but we wrote 60 plus because we really do not want to interrupt the final discussion and Q&A session. So we will try to do this within 1 hour, but we may go, it may last a bit longer, but obviously you are very welcome and we encourage you to stay as long as you can because we are sure it's worth it. We have 3 fantastic speakers with us today: Steve Shaw from Power for People, David Gray from Bristol City Council, and Cyril Boich from CEVI, a Swiss startup working on peer-to-peer residential solar energy trading. And before I will give the floor to our panelists, we would like to know who is actually with us today. So we prepared 2 short polls that we would like you to fill out. And Niklas, if I may ask you to turn on the first poll. The first question of ours is, what context do you work in? And please answer this question. So what context do you work in? We have several options. It's politics, academia, business, NGOs, and mysterious category of others. Whenever you're ready, Niklas, please.
Yeah, we have 80% who voted already. So let's wait another 10 seconds for those who have not decided yet, and then
yes, whenever you're ready.
So there we are. These are the results. So we have 9% of our attendees from politics, actually. Then the majority, 48% from academia. Still 21% working in business and 6% in NGOs. And then we'll have 15% from other, where, yeah, we might find out who that is. That's it.
Okay, perfect. We have prepared also one more short poll for you because today's topic is actually local electricity bill campaign for local energy generation. So we would like to ask you, have you ever heard actually of the local electricity bill before? And the questions are, yeah, I have signed up to support the bill. So you officially support the bill. The second one, I would like to support the bill, so you're interested, but would like to inform yourself better, or I have never heard of it. Niklas, whenever you're ready, share the results with us.
All right, so 88% are done, 86. I'll wait a couple more seconds, but I think we have a clear picture. Let's share it right here. So 11% have already signed up and supported. 33 are optimistic and or positive about it and would like to support it and seemed interested. And then, yeah, more than half of the audience actually has not yet heard of it. So there's potential to learn a lot today, I would say.
Yeah, definitely, especially that. I cannot change my slide. Yes, especially that Steve Shaw from Power of People is with us today. So he can answer all of your questions and introduce the bill to you. And Stephen, yes, he's a director of Power for People. And before founding Power for People, he worked on a number of successful campaigns for new environmental UK laws, including the campaign for the Climate Change Act and ran the campaign for the Sustainable Communities Act. Steve, we are very happy to have you here with us today. We are very excited for your presentation. I'm giving you now the rights and control over the slides so you can hopefully change them by yourself. And yeah, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Olga. I hope you can all hear me clearly. Please type a message or say so if you can't. I want to start by saying thank you so much, Olga and Niklas, for organising today and for promoting the event as well. It's great to see from those polls we've got some people who can really benefit from this session. I want to thank Sonnet as well for organising this. I think Sonnet's a great organisation. I'm glad it exists, and I was honoured to be invited to come and speak today, so thank you. As Olga said, yes, I'm the director and founder of Power for People. We are a climate campaigning organisation, and our aim is to accelerate the transition in the UK to 100% renewable energy, but also to ensure that transition benefits local communities. We regard it as essential that the transition that needs to happen to renewable energy benefits local communities and their local economies. Otherwise, it just will not be accepted. And indeed, if it does, then I think we're going to see a much easier pathway to actually getting the level of renewables we need in order to stop climate change. So that's Power for People. We run citizen mobilisation campaigns to change UK law and policy. And it's very effective, but I'll talk about that in a moment. So I shall move forward on my slides. All right. So our flagship campaign is called the Community Energy Revolution. And as you have heard, it is for a bill, called the Local Electricity Bill. But first, I'm going to talk about what we see as the problem. So here is a picture of a wonderful community energy group in Brixton, which is in South London. There are a number of these groups around the country. These groups are not the problem. The problem is that there's not enough of them. There's about 500 of these local groups. They are almost completely staffed by volunteers, and they have managed to get some funding together and build some renewable energy. So here we've got it on top of some flats, some solar. But the trouble is, there's just not enough of it. There was a government report by the UK government in 2014 that said that by now there could be 3 gigawatts worth of generating capacity of community scale renewables in the UK. But at the moment, we have less than a tenth of that. So it's a massively under-realized potential here. And these groups are wonderful. They do wonderful work. Here's another one. I'll just move forward. So here's another one. This is out in the countryside of England, over to the west. This is called West Mill Solar. They're in a county called Somerset. So obviously slightly larger project. You can see they've even been able to build some wind turbines in the back there, big solar arrays. Great stuff, really great stuff. But this should be happening at scale across the UK. We estimate that it could be, at the very least, by now it could have been 10% of generating capacity. And there's all the reason and all the evidence that it could be a lot more. So the problem is that this is being blocked by basically a market structure that is antiquated. It made sense when it was established in the early 1990s, but now it needs reform because we don't have these, it's not obviously just about big power stations generating electricity. And so we seek to create that reform with what I shall now talk about, which is the solution. Before I do, sorry, here's another thing that we often share, which is trying to give an impression of just how much potential there is. So this one, community energy in the UK could power 2.1 million homes by 2030. So again, giving you the idea just how much potential there is that is not being realised and is being blocked. So the solution. The solution is to change the rules that govern the market, and that means legislation. And so that's why we are ultimately focusing on Parliament. We need the UK Parliament to change the law so that the regulator of the market, which is called Ofgem, can establish what we call a right to local supply. So here's the bill itself. This is actually from last year. the number of MPs there listed at the end has now increased a lot. It's now over 200. There's about 100 listed there. So the support's built up a lot. But the bill itself, as you can see here, quite simple bill, only a page. That's because at this stage, it's the principle that needs to be laid down. It will be at later stages in the parliamentary process that amendments and detail would be added to ensure that loopholes were closed, etc. But for now, it's the principle, and the principle being to reform the market so that communities can sell locally generated energy directly to local people, to remove the disproportionate costs that are faced because of the antiquated market structure. And then you would have thriving local energy companies, and people, we in the UK could all buy our electricity directly from a local supplier. What that would do is that would unlock the generating capacity for new renewables at a community scale. So to give you an example, we've done research where we have interviewed the community energy groups that already exist, and they have all said unanimously, if they could sell directly to local people, then they would be able to make a business case to build more local renewable generation. But they can't sell directly to local people, as I've said, because the costs are just so high. It's about £1 million minimum just as an entry setup cost. So it's obviously only made for big players, and that is exactly what the bill aims to change. So that's the solution. Now let me talk about the campaign. So what we're trying to do is get lots and lots of people to lobby their MPs. The reason I've got this picture here is this is a campaign. This is the first campaign I worked on. This is back in 2003. So at that time, there was no doorstep recycling collection in the UK. And it was led by Friends of the Earth. It was a big campaign across the country, and it got people to write to their MPs, and it introduced the Household Waste Recycling Act, which meant that every single house could put the recycling out at the doorstep every week. It was a fantastic campaign. It led to a massive increase in recycling, obviously, and it just shows the power of when you get lots of people together and they all lobby their MPs, you can create real, concrete, specific, significant change. So this is a great example. But another example, a bigger example, this is a big offshore wind farm off the coast of Yorkshire, which is in the northeast of England. The UK now has the biggest offshore wind farms in the world, and they exist because the Climate Change Act was passed in 2008, and that was another citizens-led campaign, a grassroots mobilisation campaign where enormous numbers of people lobbied their local MP, and so that's why we follow the method. It's very, very effective. It's also extremely efficient. With a small campaign team and a lean budget, you can create real impressive citizen-led change that actually gets you an environmental benefit. So this works. I can't emphasize that enough. So what we need you to do, please, is to sign up, and then we can ask you to take action at key times. But the other thing, of course, to do is to please write to your MP and ask them to support the local electricity bill. Simple as that. If you're not in the UK, we'd be really interested to talk to you if you'd like to learn more. But of course, this is a UK-based campaign. So there's a brief overview. I hope that's been clear and interesting, and I really look forward to your questions.
Okay, Steve, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it was a great impulse and a starter for our conversation. I actually already have one follow-up question, because I would like to ask you what is actually happening right now with the bill, because it's been reintroduced to the Parliament, and due to COVID related troubles, there are some delays with I don't know, with the debating over the bill. So could you say a couple of words actually what is happening right now, and also what kind of impact have you achieved through this campaign? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so at the moment the bill is in Parliament as a backbench bill. These campaigns take several years to succeed, in my experience. So what we do is we have the bill introduced each year into Parliament, and that is a great way of bringing more and more MPs on board in support of it. But only at the final stage do we introduce the bill in a form that actually will proceed through its parliamentary stages and into law. The reason you do that is because there's you need to build up the number of MPs supporting it first. Otherwise, it has no chance when you go for that final push. At the moment, as I said, we have over 200 MPs supporting it, so that's nearly a third. If you have half of all the House of Commons, technically you could then succeed. So that would be 326 MPs. But really, you need more than that. You need to really ensure, and in my experience from those other campaigns that I've worked on that were successful, it's more like at least 400 MPs, so well over half, which is, and again, it's why we need lots of public support. We have a lot of public support happening as well. There's nearly 60 local authorities across the UK that have supported it officially, which is fantastic. We've got over 50 big NGOs and charities backing it, and there are companies as well who are backing it. One of the regional grid monopolies is backing it, which is Electricity Northwest, which is very interesting, given that they will have to spend more money on the upgrade it would lead to. But I think they realise that it's important and it needs to be done. Good Energy, the utility, one of the licensed utilities, last week publicly supported it. Very interesting as well, an incumbent company supporting it. So this is really encouraging. It shows that it's really got potential. Also, one other thing to mention, those 200 plus MPs that support it, they are from a very broad cross-party basis. We have strong representation from all parties. And in fact, the Conservative Party are the largest group among them. So it's not like this is just an opposition thing at all. This has real potential here. And I think that makes sense because this is about something that's going to be practical, it's going to benefit local economies, and it's going to accelerate our transition to net zero, which we desperately need to do.
Yeah, thank you. I have actually so many questions to you, but I think it's not a good idea that I talk all the time. So please, Nicholas, do we have any questions at that point from our attendees that you could bring in? Okay.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah, I'm already getting nervous because they're piling up. So we do have a bunch of questions. I think the first one from Nick Saxby just seems perfect to start with. He's asking, we have an MP who's not only a climate change denier, but a champion of the cause. How can we make progress with him? Or is our constituency a write-off?
Oh, it's a great question. So it is really important to lobby your MP, no matter what their position. In the past, what I have seen is that MPs who initially are opposed something can be turned to can change their mind if they have strong representation from local constituents. Now, I appreciate someone who is perhaps a climate denier or very unsure about the benefits and so on, may not switch completely. But what I've also seen is that MPs who initially think that they're going to oppose something can be moved to a position where they decide, because of all those constituents of theirs who've said that they support it, decide to abstain, and that's valuable too. So you might think your actions aren't of value, but actually they might be the most value if it means that particular MP decides to abstain.
Thank you for this answer. Yeah, I think, Niklas, we have maybe time for one more question, and then we will move on.
One more. Well, then maybe let's take a slightly more critical one for a good balance of questions here. So this one is from Jamie Delargy, if I pronounce that correctly. Excuse me if not. And this is, in Northern Ireland, half of our electricity is generated from local renewable sources. The model seems to be working. Why do we need local community ownership of assets?
So firstly, to give some clarity, and apologies, because I was saying the UK, and actually at the moment, the bill applies only to Britain. So that's England, Wales, and Scotland. And that is because the energy regulator, Ofgem, only covers those three countries, and it doesn't cover Northern Ireland. There is the chance, and indeed we've actually had people contacting us wanting it to be extended and to also apply to Northern Ireland. Let's say that happens, and let's say that it then did apply to Northern Ireland. This is about reforming the market. So this is about making the costs proportionate if you want to sell locally generated renewable energy. So it doesn't force any ownership of assets either way. It doesn't change those rules. What it does is it makes it viable if you are generating locally and you want to then sell locally to be able to do that. It's a very reasonable market approach.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I suppose we have probably many interesting questions, but I think I would stop them for now and move on with our presentations to our next speaker. Thank you so much, and we'll get back to you in our Q&A session. So our next speaker is David Gray, who is the Energy Supply Program Manager for Bristol City Council. Let me just change this slide. Responsible for buying £7 million per year of energy supplies for the council's own use and for organisations such as schools supported by the council. He joined Bristol City Council a year ago, having previously spent 33 years working for the UK Ministry of Defence, initially working in information technology, then in various energy management roles, before finishing as the lead for the ministry's energy supply contracts. And David will tell us today about a new local project in Bristol where wind and solar generators close to the city will be able actually to sell their energy directly to consumers through the grid, but avoiding some of the national transmission costs. So we can see a similar approach that has been included in the model propagated by the local electricity bill. And David, over to you. Just let me give you control over your slides.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. You should be able now to move them.
Good. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Steve's outlined some of the problems we have with getting local supplies into the UK energy system. Where Steve's trying to fix the problem, I'm trying to find a way around it. So I'm responsible for the energy supply for Bristol City Council, but let me start off with giving the background. Just try. I don't think I have control over the slides.
Try to click on a slide and then move it. And if it doesn't work, I can
do
it.
That's it. Yeah. Okay, so to start off with a little bit of background on Bristol. We're a large city in the southwest of England. We've got a population of nearly 500,000. Like with many cities across Europe, we have a carbon neutrality target. And a key part of that, of achieving that carbon neutrality, is going to be the decarbonisation of our energy supplies across the city as a whole. We do have a significant amount of local renewable energy generation in the area. And the picture in the top right there, that's the council's own wind farm and solar farm. And there are a number of other similar systems in the area. But collectively, whilst in the UK, nearly 40% of the power on the national grid comes from renewables, only about 8% of the power used by the city of Bristol comes from locally generated renewables. So there is a shortfall there, and it means that we're effectively importing a lot of our renewable electricity from the rest of the country. So there's an imbalance there we'd like to try and address. The city is also doing some major investment in district heating systems, which will have an impact on the overall demand for electricity, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Bristol City Council is the local authority responsible for running the city. We're a significant landowner in our own right. We've got a large number of properties and a fairly substantial energy bill of our own. But to meet our energy supplies, we are very heavily reliant on grid supplies. We do have some rooftop solar systems, but the vast majority of the energy that we use comes in over the electricity and the gas grids. So if we're going to decarbonise anything in the short term, we've got to look at those grid supplies and see what we can do about reducing the carbon impact of those. What we do have within the council's procurement system is something called the Social Values Toolkit. And what that allows us to do is to put a value on environmental and social aspects of a contract. So if it promotes jobs in the areas, if it improves biodiversity, if it creates training opportunities, we can put a value on those and we can count that towards the overall value of the contract, which means that we could go for a potentially more expensive solution if it has a higher social value. So it gives us some manoeuvring room in coming up with novel solutions. The council's own estate has a carbon neutrality target of 2025. So we pretty much have about 4 years in which to figure out how to neutralise our existing carbon load. Looking at sort of general energy trends, overall demand for electricity, despite our best efforts to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings, and some of them are challenging because they're heritage buildings, but overall we expect the electricity demand to increase largely because of the electrification of heating. So we're trying to move away in the city from having natural gas as the primary heating source and moving to the district heating systems or to heat pumps. That's going to reduce our demand for gas, and I think over time we're increasingly looking for supplying that as green gas or biogas, but it is going to push up our demand for electricity, which is going to add to our carbon imbalance problem. We have a number of biomass systems. We've had a few issues with them. We're not about to close them all down, but I don't see a significant increase in the number of biomass systems in use. And the heat networks is a slow growth, so it will start to build up progressively over a number of years. So I think that the message there is we have to figure out how we get a lower carbon electricity supply, because we're going to be using a lot of it. If you look at the UK conventional grid supply, so if you have a business contract with a supplier for electricity in the UK, if you look along the power flow line, as Steve mentioned, the system's designed around big central generation stations, whether that's coal, nuclear, gas, or increasingly renewables. So that there's nearly 40% of the power going into the national grid these days is from renewables. Between those feed into the national grid, who run the transmission network, that feeds into the local distribution network, which then feeds into individual buildings that draw electricity. The money flow there, the red arrows show the direction of the bills. The payments obviously go in the other direction. That's a simplified model of the UK billing system, because believe me, it's incredibly complicated. But it shows the key role of the supplier in managing all these various taxes and charges and government initiatives that go into an electricity bill. A UK electricity bill these days, only about a third of it is actually for electricity. 2/3 is made up of all these different charges. The other significant factor is if you draw electricity from the national grid, for reporting purposes for carbon neutrality, we have to use the grid average carbon loading, which is about 230 grams a kilowatt hour at the moment. Now, the council, as I said, has its own wind farm, it has its own solar farm. We are generating zero carbon electricity, and we're exporting that out to the grid, but we can't count that because the electricity we're importing in from the grid carries the grid average carbon loading. So if we're going to decarbonize our supplies, we've got the challenge of being tied into the grid's carbon loading. So one of the first things we can do is make direct use of the power from our wind turbines in the solar farm. And the way we can do that is what's called a sleeving arrangement. So if you think of this, we're creating a virtual tunnel through the grid. It's a bit like a virtual private network on the internet. So we create a tunnel between the point at which our power normally enters the grid and our own buildings. And in that way, we can virtually supply our buildings. It's not a physical connection. The wind farm and the solar farm's too far away from our buildings to actually directly connect them, but we can connect them virtually. And if we do that, it means we can count that as zero carbon electricity, and that would meet about a third of our demand. So that's a useful contribution in itself to reducing our carbon loading. However, it only meets about a third of our demand. So our thinking is, how do we extend that sort of sleeving arrangement to other local generators? There's a number of models that are being proposed, there's a number of ideas that are being floated within the UK as to how to do this. What we've come up with is what we call the sleeved pool. So what we would propose to do is we would strike agreements with local generators in the Bristol areas to pool the electricity they produce into a virtual pool that our buildings could then draw upon. So we create a flow between the local generators and our buildings with the pool in the middle. However, there is always going to be an imbalance between the amount of power we're generating and the amount of power we're demanding. So there's going to be times when the local generators are producing too much power. So we'd either have to put that into battery storage or we export to the grid. There's going to be times when they're not producing enough, so we have to draw power in off the grid or draw it out of our battery storage. So because there's a grid dimension there, and because we're sending power to and from the grid, we need a licensed supplier. The way the UK system works, anything to do with the grid and grid balancing, you have to have a licensed supplier. So we envisage that we need a pool manager to manage the balance between the generators, the grid, the battery storage, and demand. Contractually, this is a different sort of model. What we would do is we'd contract directly to the local generator to buy their power output. So we'd bypass the supplier. We would have a direct contract. That way we could promote and develop local energy systems within the Bristol areas. We can get to select who it is who's going to contribute into the pool, completely independent of who a licensed supplier would normally get the power from. We still need the licensed supplier to bill us for the grid and for all these other extra charges involved. But the idea is we have a long-term contract with a local energy generator. And as Steve said, with the community energy systems, their difficulty is in building a business case. If they can go to the bank with a 20-year contract with a local authority, that gives them a massive foundation that they can build a business case on for developing local systems. This is the concept. What we're looking to do initially, we're going to set up a power purchase agreement, hopefully towards the end of this year, and at least make use of our own supplies. We've been given a grant by the Microgeneration Certification Service Charitable Foundation to do a study into the sleeve pool concept. So we're going to commission a study, say, is it viable? Would it work? What are the issues? If that study says, yeah, it will work, you should go ahead and do this, then we're going to set up a small pilot, what my boss calls the sleeved puddle, where we have a small number of generators and a small number of buildings and a licensed supplier, and just test this out and see if it works. If that goes well, year, 18 months from now, we start to ramp up to full-scale operation. So that's a brief overview of, as I say, an alternative solution to try and bypass the problem that Steve mentioned earlier on.
Thank you, David, for this presentation. It is a really great example of alternative solutions, I think, and it's been really interesting to get to know more about this. I have a more general question to you, because I'm wondering, as far as I understood, you're starting this project in November, and I'm just wondering to what extent this change at the local level, so some good practices that you are trying to figure out at the local level, can then bring the change to the national level. So my question is, I guess, about how powerful actually are local authorities and local governments in pushing for energy transition in the UK?
Individually, we can strongly influence within our local area, but collectively, we can exchange good practice. So we're already talking to a number of our neighbouring local authorities who are interested in either joining our pool or setting up their own pools. We're part of a wider association of local authorities. So what we learn from this will be a case study that will be then sent out to local authorities across the country so that they can look to set up similar schemes in their own area.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Sounds great. Niklas, again, over to you. Do we have any questions from our attendees to David?
Yes, thank you, Olga. Yes, we do. So maybe to start with, the first one is rather a positive comment from Charles Gamble, who was saying a very clear exposition of the statues and solutions. Great presentation from David Gray. So I think that's a good one to start with and not too complicated. And then there's two from Jake Barnes and from Sven Klaas, who I think we can maybe combine. So the first one is straightforward. Who is Bristol City Council's licensed supplier for the sleeved pool? And the second one would be, what are the benefits of having a local grid management instead of regulating this on a national level?
Okay, we don't yet have a licensed supplier as the pool manager. What we do is we go out to contract with that. So we put out a tender opportunity and invite that there's a couple of hundred UK local suppliers who could bid for that. We just need someone with a supply license to manage it. So we'll go out to tender and see who we can attract. As local grid management, we're not really sort of managing the grid. We're having to work within the rules of the national and the local grid. What we're trying to do is change some of the contractual mechanisms here. So we're contracting directly with the generators, but we still have to go through the DNO local grid, and ideally not through the national transmission grid because it attracts extra charges. So this is what we're trying to sort of manage the system, but working within it.
All right, then I'll take one from Alex Schlicke. He also asked a question before and didn't get the chance to be heard, so I'll take you up now. And that would be, who would be responsible in the sleeved pool arrangement for selling excess generation to the grid? Or is the detail going to be worked out in the research study?
That would be the pool manager. So that would be one of their key roles, is managing that surplus and selling it out to the grid onto the wholesale market.
All right. Then we have another question from Caroline Bird. That is, how does this relate to the BCC City Leap project?
Excellent question. Someone's done their research. City Leap could well have a role in managing the pool. They could well have a role in providing generation. It's probably too early to say because we've just gone back out to tender again with the City Leap contract. And so we're waiting to hear back from bidders as to what sort of proposals they have in mind. But certainly there are key roles that City Leap bidders could participate in, depending on the nature of what they propose.
Okay, I guess for all of those who don't know the City Leap project, you might just want to do a little research later on. And can we have one more, Olga, or?
I would actually prefer to keep going with the presentations now, and maybe let's save this one for our Q&A session. And please, of course, feel free to type down your questions to David. We'll take them into discussion at the end of our meeting.
All right,
okay.
Great.
So our next presenter, let me change the slide, is Cyril Borch. As I mentioned before, this will be our input from Switzerland. Switzerland is already ahead with comparable laws that support local energy producers. And we would like to see what we can actually learn from the Swiss model. So Cyril is a founder and manager of CEFI, a startup working on a peer-to-peer residential photovoltaic solar energy trading. And after completing an apprenticeship as a bricklayer in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, Cyril graduated as an energy systems engineer from the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts in 2016. While still a student, he was called in a consultant on solar construction projects for the new topic of shared internal consumption, which led to the FAG Zentrum and CEVI. Cyril, thank you very much for being with us today. We are very thrilled for your presentation. I think you should already have control over your slides, and yeah, over to you. The floor is yours.
So thank you for having me. I guess you can hear me.
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm very excited. It was very interesting to see these other perspectives, and I would like to give some perspectives on the situation in Switzerland. So that's again my face you see here, so we can keep on going. The frame conditions in Switzerland is that we have kind of the United States of Switzerland. So we have 26 cantons and a very federalistic system. So we have a lot of hundreds of utilities and suppliers. So in theory, the unbundling is taking place. So the grids and the services and energy is separated in these companies. But in practice, it's still very connected and still one company. They share the office and the coffee machine. So this is a little bit the situation. It's still a monopoly. Only big projects with more than 100,000 kilowatt hours a year can actually ask energy in the free market. That's what we talk about. The Swiss energy communities, or what I call in English now Swiss energy communities. It has different names in the different languages, of course. It's a typical project here, and I'm very proud of that project because it was on the 1st January 2018 that the market was liberalized and you can apply solutions as a private entrepreneur or private person. And on the 10th of January 2018, we actually took into action this house, which you can see in the picture. That's what we are talking about in this presentation. So in summary, the Swiss energy communities are allowed since 2018, and it's not yet mature, this market, but we will have around 4,000 projects a year built. And it is considered a driver, but not for all kind of solar systems. It's for small and medium-sized solar power on top of multifamily houses or little areas or energy communities. So I would like to start with some terms that we talk about the same thing. So I'm talking about the self-consumption. So if you have a consumption like a coffee machine and then you eat lunch and then in the evening you have some consumption of electricity and you have a production, then if these two curves are overlaying, you have self-consumption. So when you have multifamily houses or communities being taken together, this layer is much higher if we look at it from the solar perspective, which is the most common energy production, decentralized energy production. So the prices, one argument is that the prices are a little bit unreliable for the length of the investment. So we don't know what's happening in a few years with the solar power during summer lunch, because it might be minus prices in 20 years, or how is it going to develop? And if you have these different pieces of tariffs, like you have the grid, you have taxes, you have different pieces, if you take it together, the level is higher and it's a little bit more stable to plan the investment for such a system. So previously, each apartment, or the current situation is that each apartment is on the monopoly, 100% of electricity comes from outside. And the new situation is that you take that together, you have one system, you have one smart meter here at the system boundary, and you organize your energy community internally. Maybe sometimes only 70% of the energy comes from outside, sometimes less. The rest comes from the roof. but this can be extended. So you don't need to be inside of the system boundary of a multifamily house. You can make it bigger. You can cross streets and rivers. And how did we get there? So first, there was a first version where you can do that inside of the monopoly of this big supplier and utilities. And it wasn't very dynamic. There were some solutions regionally. So they suggested to make a liberalization. In the public vote of 2017, we have about 5 public votes a year about laws. And together with the phase out of nuclear power, and the people said yes with almost 60%. So it's a very clear result for the politicians to keep on going this way. So as a result, the dynamics have been very high. Like the system boundaries are clear, the rules are clear. So more than 70 companies came into existence all over Switzerland. Some utilities also provide solutions in their home area. But there are a lot of other solutions, startups, companies. There are some, they come from the smart metering perspective, some come from this building services, some blockchain startups came into existence. The dynamics are really high, the level of innovation is really high, and it will be very interesting how this further develops. Might also be a consolidation in the future, we will see. So this is our product. What we've seen is that if you have big energy communities, you can easily work with that. Like you can ask engineers to plan it and to organize it and build it. So we then start, and big suppliers, they fight about the big projects. So we decided to focus on the smaller projects, on more like the multifamily house boundaries, to provide them an easy solution to have with a few minutes. You have your billing for your tenants, and it's fair and according the rules and the laws. So we did this software as a service. It's called Sevi, and you can log in, you can try it out, and if you understand how it works, you can export your PDFs, and then sometimes you have to pay for at that point. So that's our background, that's in the product. In the end, the real problem was that you have to make a billing. You have to make this PDF and ask your tenants for money. And this is very critical because then you have to be sure what you do. And the margins are fixed, like they're for smaller multifamily house, you don't have huge margins for solar power. There needs to be a scalable and easy solution. If not, you have no chance to make that individual approach with engineers for each kilowatt hour of electricity. That's just not possible. So some learnings I would like to give to you is simple rules are better rules. You have always a lot of people involved. We do this project since 2016, since we've been students, and you have a lot of people involved, and you have a lot of different tenants involved. So make the rules easy and understandable, and that's also for the lawmakers. Explain it to your grandma, at least the concepts. If it's so complex that nobody understands it, if you need experts to execute it, try to keep it simple. One advantage of the Swiss system is that you have very clear system boundaries, so you can plan it, because you have planners, you have specialists. If you build new houses or change existing houses or areas, communities, and if you have clear system boundaries to discuss, you can make versions and try to achieve the optimum. We had a little bit an issue with fake alternatives from monopolists. So when they started to liberalize, they tried to work around the rules and make their own rules. And it was a hazard now for 2 or 3 years, because the lawmakers didn't really intervene and say, no, it's liberalized and we have one rule for everyone who wants to participate on solutions. So it was kind of a hazard, because in some regions there was so much subsidies that it's like no market where we can actually innovate at all, and that's a pity. The weakness is that the Swiss version is bound to the physical system. So you cannot rent the grid and exchange energy between 2 energy communities. It's like you have a physical unit, which make it has a lot of advantage, but also some disadvantage. So that's my email, and our current main channel is on LinkedIn, so you can follow us, and we post from time to time what we do and how we develop. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cyril, for this presentation. It was very informative, and it's very interesting what is happening currently in Switzerland. I'm wondering, because actually the how it all started is like a big social support and acceptance for this way, for this decentralized energy system, and it was proven in this public vote. But how did it start? Actually, was it like this in Switzerland for a longer time? How actually people got aware of, that this way would work better for them?
Well, that's actually a quite tough question, because the public poll or the public vote was about combined measures. So it was a phase out of nuclear power and a lot of other changes. So it's difficult to say. So that the direction was clear and supported by the people. So it's very clear, a clear message to the politicians. But it wasn't an exclusive vote about the self-consumption of solar power or something like that. So that's a little bit difficult to say. For sure, it was supported by a little bit more left and right politicians, because the left or the green like to support the solar power, and the right they like it because you don't have additional subsidies. You actually liberalize, and you give that system boundary as a playground to try out new solutions in the digitalized world of real estate and energy, which has potential to innovate and accelerate if you look at Europe or more other countries in bigger markets in the future. So this is about maybe is that question answered with that?
Yeah, I believe it is, as much as we can answer it right now. I think it's clarified. Okay, so Nicholas, do we have any questions from our attendees to Cyril? And with that, I would like to open our Q&A final session of this webinar. Nicholas will be moderating it. And yes, I remind you that you can type out your questions in the questions box in your control panel, or also use the hashtag Sonnet Explored, and so send us your questions via Twitter, and Nicholas will be collecting them and asking, and passing them on to our speakers. Nicholas, over to you.
All right, thank you, Olga. Then I'll also join the panel here, as I will be talking more now. So we have maybe to start with a more technical, straightforward question to Cyril from Michael Fremouv. Sorry for pronunciations. That would be, what is the threshold for being considered small to medium in square meter or kilowatt hours? And the second additional question to that was if there's a virtual setup like in the UK, but you already answered that there's a physical boundary. But yeah, this threshold would still be interesting, I think.
Well, that's not very tough to say. I would say that the bigger systems are more than 100 kilowatt peak. Middle size, I would say, is about between 30 and 100 kilowatt peak, and small ones are smaller than 30 kilowatt peak spontaneously. I don't know if this is an academically right in the reports of the Swiss energy department, but it's about that.
Okay, thanks.
But it's also depending not only on the size of the system, but also on the number of apartments you have underneath. So there we see that you have normally less than 10 tenants. It's small, between 10 and 50 is middle. And if you have big projects with 100 tenants, it's also an influence. So you have these two factors, not only production.
All right, thank you. Then let's maybe add one more to Cyril for understanding, and then I think the next question also goes to the whole panel. So one more for Cyril from Jake Barnes. Can you explain a little bit more about the service you offer? Is it a means for producers and consumers to account for energy traded / used, and how to calculate bills in relation to existing government taxes, levies, and use of system charges? This was a long question. I hope you...
Yeah, that's typical, because even if you have simple rules, it goes quite quick that you can discuss a lot of technical and legal issues in details, and it gets complex even with simple rules. So first of all, if you speak German, you can go into our help center and see some articles which are really extensive, and also on YouTube we have some videos explaining a lot of these issues, because then it would be a little bit too much to discuss in this webinar. Summarized, it is a software as a service to make the billing, and it is our approach now for this online service. There are different approaches, of course, is that we go close to the direction of the service charges, so additional cost you have on your renting an apartment. So you take the bill from outside, you distribute it in between the apartments, and then you set a tariff for the solar power coming from the roof. So it's our approach for small project is quite simplified. So it's not a complex trading or mechanism in between there yet.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Then Mark Hudson wants to know, what do the panelists think the incumbents who are keen to keep things the same will do? How can the move to renewables and community ownership be distorted, shaped, captured? So I think this is probably, yeah, towards Cyril on your experience with that, because you also mentioned that. And then maybe this is also something to discuss looking at the campaign that Steve is running.
Well, I think that one important part is for sure the emotional value of electricity, which is difficult to capture. Electricity is not only a good you trade, it's also a right to have it. It's a complex thing. So if you are able to connect the people directly with these projects, then you can set an emotional value for this electricity, which is very valuable. So even if you pay the same price, it is worth more for you personally, maybe. But you also have to be careful about wrong expectations. We did these apps and visualization and smart metering device and blah, blah. And in the end, there was maybe 10 or 5% of the tenants really looking at it at all. So it's a little bit both. In the end, it goes about the price and investment safety to have a certain dynamics. So I'm more in the field of system boundaries, which are liberalized. So I think a little bit different maybe than the others, which it's not wrong or right.
Okay. And on this question of how do big companies react to this wealth of startups that you also presented, can you say something about that? What was your experience there? Do you feel outcompeted somehow, or
a lot of reactions? A lot of reactions in all directions. Some support, some try to keep you away of their market at any cost. If they somehow can use the monopoly part to subsidize or make their own services, if it doesn't make sense and they invest a lot of money into services which do not make sense, it doesn't matter, because they don't want us in their market. Some supporting, some want to cooperate, and some are buying a lot of these startups, partially also with, I guess, with money from the monopoly. So it's a little bit, it's a high dynamic. Every half a year it's changing quick. So we are exotic because we are independent and the team is owning the company, and we just want to keep on innovating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then maybe let's pass on the question to Steve. Steve, you also mentioned already in your presentation, there's this one energy provider in Southwest or Northwest, I don't remember, but who kind of surprisingly supports the bill. Do you already kind of have a dialogue or more of a battle there with large energy providers?
Maybe it's actually not that much of a surprise. The examples I gave were the support we currently have from, I think, businesses that you could call incumbents. is Good Energy, who are a national utility in the UK. They're smaller, they're not one of the largest 6 that dominate the market here, but they are nevertheless a significant player. And also the regional grid monopoly called Electricity Northwest. Our grid is owned by the distribution part of it, which is the sort of smaller wires that go right up to the homes and so on. It's owned by regional monopolies. So to have one of the regional monopolies backing the bill and writing to MPs in their region is really quite remarkable, or perhaps it isn't, and that would be my broad answer to the question, which is that sometimes you see incumbents resist change that's going to affect the situation they operate in, which isn't that surprising. But often you don't see that. Often you see them support the change. If the change is practical, and if they can see that it's reasonable, and also that it needs to happen, it's probably going to happen anyway, they often want to be seen publicly as being on the right side of the argument. An excellent example of this in the UK was the enormous backing from business and industry, big and small, for the Climate Change Act campaign that ran from 2005 to 2008, which I was part of the campaign team. The Confederation of British Industry ended up being wholeheartedly on board the campaign, which of course was very helpful in persuading the government. And so I think we are starting to see that already with this campaign. And I also emphasize, I've obviously named Good Energy as a company that are supporting it, but we are calling on and reaching out to all incumbents, asking them to be constructive, to work with us in a dialogue, and to make sure that we can all ultimately support the change. I would want to emphasize one other thing though, because of course, yes, there might be incumbents sometimes who will always resist. And that is what I said earlier about how these campaigns are won. They are not won by a company saying they like it. They are won by large numbers of citizens signing up and then lobbying their elected representatives. So, and that is ultimately what makes Parliament and government do what we need.
All right, thank you. Then one question to David. Looking at the dynamic created in the Swiss startup scene that Cyril mentioned, do you see a similar resonance with the sleeving pool as a local supporting framework?
I think we do. We've had some discussions with the Bristol Energy Network and local community systems in the area, and there is a high degree of interest in what we're developing. We kind of have to sort of push them back a little and say, well, it's an idea, we haven't actually got something you can sign up to yet, but there's certainly a lot of interest being generated in the local area, enough to encourage us to think that if we can get this off the ground, there are lots of people who would sign up to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Then we have one question. Let's see. We have some more technical questions also on Cyril. Maybe we can take that in the end and say a little bit in the campaigning and governance part of questions. So there's one more now from Baha Kuban. Assuming future democratic ownership of energy sector assets is a desirable and desirable societal model to pursue, which of these initiatives paves the way or facilitates such a future? I'm not sure to whom this goes, but if you feel you have an answer, feel free to take it.
I think certainly the sleeve pool, we're sort of looking to encourage communities to take more of an interest in energy generation. So it's improving the understanding, the knowledge and democratization of energy.
What if I may add to the answer, what we want to see is an increasing amount of community ownership of local generation, and also of that ability to then run the organisations that sell directly to the local area. And that might be on a larger scale, it might be on a very small scale, it will depend. And the bill that we're campaigning for will allow that to happen. We are trying to set up a situation where community cooperatives, for example, will be able to flourish and thrive in a way that they just can't at the moment. That said, the bill is not about just creating that. The bill will lead to professionalisation. It will lead to community energy companies. that are local professional bodies, and that's fine. An analogy that we often give is brewing local beer. In the UK, we've had a wonderful surge over the last few decades in local brewing, and we all get to enjoy this lovely local beer. A lot of that has come from private companies, small businesses, and that's fine. That's great. We don't necessarily need public ownership in order to have the renewables. What we need is the renewables, and we need them quickly.
Okay. Then, yeah, I guess that some of the questions now tend to go towards more the business model of Savvy and some technical questions also. But there's one from Twitter, which is like a combined question, I'd say, and it's as follows. So, does Savvy share any real-time data with users? That's the question for Savvy, and then there's a follow-up.
No.
Okay, that's a short answer.
We've done the smart metering thing. I mean, it was announced that on the 1st January 2018, you can make your own smart meters. So we actually built up, except for the hardware, we built up everything from scratch in 2 to 3 months. And then we introduced just 2 months later, Meinhard from our team released an app to show in real time this data. And currently the interest of the people has not been high enough to keep on developing. We would like to go back that way, and we have the basis, but currently in Savvy it's no real-time data shown to inhabitants.
All right, thanks. And then there's one for the Sonnet project, actually. So Olga, maybe you want to take that, but maybe also David can feed in because Bristol is a partner city in Sonnet. So did any of the reviewed social innovations practice citizen science? It seems citizen science might fit between energy education, energy gamification, and participatory experiments.
David?
Well, I know, yeah.
I think the short answer is yes, there's clearly a role here for citizen science. We're always looking for innovative energy supply projects. It doesn't have to be a solar farm or wind turbine. If someone can develop an alternative energy system and can supply to us, we'll talk to them.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I can also just to quickly answer this question. So yes, it is in the city labs, the 6 cities that participate in the Sonnet project. Citizen science is indeed at the center of the activities. And feel free to check out the website for more info on these cities and the activities done there. And I mean, we're still rather at the beginning of the project, so it's to be filled up with more information, but I think you can find general answers there. All right, then I'd say maybe we take one more and then we have like a final round of statements. So one more again from Carolyn Bird. What is the role of subsidies in supporting this sort of change, both removing existing and creating new?
I think the UK electricity bills are a large part of what we call the non-commodity costs, so the extra charges on top of the electricity. A lot of those are funding various subsidy schemes, so it has a big impact on the electricity bills we pay. In terms of benefiting from it, we haven't really benefited that much from some of these subsidies.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen, which is a little bit interesting, is that we built some pillars to support a new solar system in Switzerland, and we had some different kind of subsidies, and it still keeps on going. But sometimes I see the first projects or the pillars become cages or obstacles, because you have to think in that rules made for the subsidies and standards, and the studies are then focusing on these categories and stuff. So I see a little bit both.
I think part of the problem we're seeing with local generation is one of the key subsidies was the feed-in tariff, and with that being largely phased out, it has undermined the business case of a lot of local energy systems. So to some extent, we're trying to sort of refill that gap, saying, okay, you haven't got a feed-in tariff, but you've got a guaranteed contract with a local authority. Does that help?
What we've seen, what we've seen in the UK is that subsidies were a major factor in the deployment and acceleration of renewable energy generation that we now have. Not completely, there were other factors as well. But to be clear, Power for People are not campaigning for subsidies. The local electricity bill would establish a right to local supply. So what that means is that in the UK, if you wanted, you could then buy locally generated renewable energy from a local energy company or a local community energy company. And that would then unlock this huge potential for more smaller scale renewable generation that, as I keep saying, we so desperately and urgently need.
All right, great. Then I think I would ask you for a final statement on our today's topic, and what do you want our audience to take home with, and what maybe hasn't been said yet, and what do you still want to get out there. And then with that, I would also say goodbye and leave the final words to our speakers and to Olga.
Let's maybe start from our first speaker. Steve, is there anything you would like to add?
I want to actually just say something about climate change directly. The threat is so real and so huge, and renewable energy is the big piece, because globally and in the UK we need to electrify heating and transport. It is the massive deployment of renewables that by far is the most important thing to be done and the most urgent thing to be done. And I believe, and it looks clear if you look back at other big changes, big social changes in the past, like universal suffrage and the abolition of slavery, that citizen power really can do this. That's why we run the campaigns we run. So please, please sign up, tell your friends, get everyone you know to lobby their MP to pass the local electricity bill.
Thank you, Steve. David, anything from your side?
I think Bristol, like with a lot of cities, we've declared a climate emergency. We're putting in place actions to deliver that. But I think key is support from local people. We need to work out the practicalities of how we achieve carbon neutrality, how we deal with the climate emergency consequences. We can't do that unless we engage and get the support of the local citizens in the Bristol area.
Yeah, thank you. Cyril?
Well, it just come to my mind what we discussed in the beginning before the webinar started, that the glaciers in Switzerland are melting away before our eyes. It's so visible, it's so impressive. And this summer and this September, it's just 30 degrees all September. It's just really depressing. I think it's important that people have the will to do something. So if you give them the framework to run, they will run for that and fight for that. So if it is as an investment with not huge profits, or it will be to innovate and being an entrepreneur, so you give them the base to fight and work. And the last one is what I discussed with an old engineer working his whole life for more sustainability. You have to be careful about your psychological and mental health, because this is a challenge. This is huge, and we are just a small wheel, and we have to take care of ourselves, because we are responsible for a lot, but not for everything. So keep on fighting, but try to keep happy, because we will not make it if we are depressed.
Yeah, these are very good remarks. I think we are a small wheel, but together we can really do a lot, and it's definitely worth fighting for. So yeah, thank you so much for your inputs. I will now ask our attendees for the last time that hopefully you have benefited from this discussion. I think it was really very interesting. And if you have any additional questions that we did not manage to answer today, please send them in to our email address, Sonnet email address. You can also contact us via Twitter. And please visit our website if you're interested in a project. The recording of this webinar will be also on our website. So if you want to watch it again and take a look at it again, then please do so on our website. You can also sign up to receive email updates from Sonnet. So if you would like to know, for example, what our next seminar, online seminar is going to be about, then please go ahead and sign up. One more promotional thing, Sonnet has lately published our first Sonnet Energy read. This is a reading which is written in a very easy to understand way. So if you would like to know more about social innovations in energy transitions, but not necessarily from academic sources, I think that this can be a nice alternative for you. Obviously, it's based on the work done by Sonnet researchers, so you can find many interesting, accurate information here. Sorry, I will come back to my last slide, because I think that with this, I would like to thank you all for participating. I would like to thank our attendees, but also many thanks to our great speakers. We've heard many interesting things here today, and yeah, I think we are all aware, or should be aware, of the importance of our future actions and work together to and unite for the energy transition. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think this is it from our side. And goodbye.
Goodbye. That was nice.
Thank you.